It is another episode of the Juice on the Cuse podcast. Wes Cheng alongside Jim Stechschulte. Thanks so much for joining us on this Wednesday, November 13, 2024. So much to talk about as always. Last night, Syracuse escaping with a 74-72 win over Colgate. The Raiders went on a 16-4 run in the second half to nearly upset the Orange Gym. It was a disjointed performance on both ends. What was more concerning to you, the offense or the defense?
It's hard to choose, but I will go with the offense just because the sheer number of layups that they miss at the rim. And while they're doing a great job on the glass, especially the offensive rebounding is a lot better than what we've been accustomed to in previous years, especially because they tried to lean, because they even last year, there was a combination of leaning on threes and guys driving and finishing at the rim. But it's great that Lampkin and Jair Davis are pounding the glass so well, but just that they're not able to finish. And it's all these opportunities that they're not able to convert. And, they eked one out past Lemoyne where they dominated the glass, and eked one out last night against Colgate where they dominated the glass. And it's just hard to see where a win's going to come from without them making right on all those misses. And it kind of has that trickle down effect where it's leading on this team to do a little more taking shots in the mid range, which, based on the cast of characters that they have, is probably not the best route to get to victory.
Yeah, so you pick the offense, I'll pick the defense. I do think the concern has to be the defense. Lemoyne and Colgate, they're not Duke and North Carolina. Syracuse giving up 82 to the Dolphins, 72 to the Raiders. I think a big reason for that is Syracuse doesn't really have great defensive personnel. It starts with the players. Who's the stopper on this team? Who's the guy you're going to put on the opposing team's best scorer? I would think right now that's probably Jair Davis. Don't get me wrong. I like Davis. He's a really nice player, but he's not CJ Fair on defense. He's not Malik Brown. Malik Brown was an all-ACC defensive player. I just don't see that kind of caliber on this year's player of this year's team. And, Jaquan Carlos was an all-CAA defender, but the guards he's going to be facing are bigger and stronger. This isn't the CAA. This is going to be the ACC. So I just don't see that kind of player on this roster right now. I'm not sure how much better the defense is going to get, and that bodes really poorly for the rest of the season.
Yeah, you do make a good point about the defense. And I think the one part it's still coming, I think we still have to hope is coming along, is if they can actually scheme up their defense at all. It's a bunch of guys, we talked last year about how they hadn't played man before and all that stuff. But it's out of the guys who are playing regularly, it's a bunch of guys who haven't played before. Bell and Starling were around last year. Great. And beyond that, it's not a whole lot of minutes that guys who are back. Cuff played, sporadically. He's playing sporadically now. And it's a bunch of guys who played elsewhere last year, all trying to come together and make things work out. It's just not going well. Like you watch guys getting picked on screens and guys getting lost in rotations or making no rotation. And it's not the five fingers making a fist thing. It's five fingers kind of doing whatever they want the whole time. And so I don't know if the mindset even of these players is going to enable them to actually shore up on defense at all.
So we're going to take a quick break. We'll have more on Syracuse's matchup with Colgate after. This is the Juice on the Cuse podcast. This is the Bet Online read. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds from everything on football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, to UFC and MMA. Head to Bet Online today. Get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online, the game starts here. Back here on the Juice on the Cuse podcast, Wes Cheng alongside Jim Stechschulte. Jim, let's talk a little bit more about the Colgate game. You wrote about this in your 6 takeaway story from last night, but the rotation is starting to take hold now that we have 2 exhibition games in, 2 regular season games under their belt. One guy we aren't seeing right now is Naheem McLeod. Jim, you think that that's making Syracuse a lot smaller and affecting their rotation? Talk to me more on that.
Yeah, I didn't make a big deal about McLeod not playing in the Lemoyne game, because we didn't see much of him in the 2 exhibition games, but we actually did see more of him in the second than the first. Lemoyne was a bad matchup for him. They didn't have any traditional centers, any traditional center-sized players, and we've seen enough of McLeod to know that his strength is not his mobility. He's not well suited to chasing guys who cut, chasing guys who camp around outside. His entire play scheme is based around being, an anchor in the middle of the defense and, protecting the rim. And so I understand that he doesn't play much in the Lemoyne game. However, last night, Colgate center is a 6'11", 265-ish pound guy. This is who has shot 2 threes in his entire collegiate career, and he's on his 5th season. He is not a guy who hangs out outside. He's a guy who we saw try to back down multiple Syracuse defenders. This is a guy who they could have played McLeod against and expected him to be fine on defense and also provide some sort of other deterrent at the rim for any other players who were getting past their individual defenders out on the perimeter. So to me, it's very concerning that McLeod may not be much in the plans at all this year. And I don't know if that's a play thing, and I don't know if that's a rehabbing from last year's injury thing, but it's concerning to me, especially because it's going to have a trickle-down effect of making the entire roster shorter, much like when he got hurt last year.
Yeah, so first things first for me is that Eddie Lampkin is probably the best offensive center Syracuse has had. I was thinking about this probably since Rakeem Christmas, at least true center, right? So he's a really nice player on offense. He's not a rim protector, and he had 1 block against Colgate, which already brings him 20% of the way to his entire total from last year, which is 5. So he can rebound. We saw that last night. He showed you that with the double-double. But Jim, to your point on McLeod, I think Syracuse misses him as a change of pace center for about 10 to 15 minutes a game. And, again, he's a rim protector. So one other thing I'll call about the rotation now that we're talking about it. So we have Andrew Cowie on the show quite frequently. He was a walk-on during that 2003 national championship run. Games like Colgate were the walk-on's ability to it was basically their NCAA tournament because that was the only time that they were going to get any run. And I think the larger point here is instead of getting your younger guys in to play more, Autry's having to use his primary starters and main rotation guys deep in the games. You saw that really only 7 guys playing. He's already tightened that rotation. That doesn't give a chance like a Lucas Taylor or an Elijah Moore, even though he played 20 minutes last night. He only played 6 in the opener against Lemoyne. He doesn't give those guys a chance to develop more. And I think that's going to be a problem later on when you actually need these rotation guys and the deeper rotation guys to play a little bit more.
Yeah, the McLeod thing does have that trickle-down effect of shortening things down. They end up playing Jair Davis as the 6th man. He's been the first guy off the bench in both games. Makes sense. He's also been the most productive. And I think his willingness to throw his weight around the way he plays is kind of used as a spark for the rest of the players when he comes in. The second guy off the bench, first game was Taylor. Last night was Moore. It seems that they're kind of in either or, first wing off the bench kind of thing, because Davis, when he comes in, he results in Freeman coming out, which because Freeman is going to end up coming back in for Lampkin and playing backup center. Beyond that, I think we were already seeing, because these first 2 games have been so close, that the other guys on the back end are kind of being slotted into much more distant roles because they can't be counted on or whatever. And I don't know if Moore is going to stay in front of Taylor the rest of the way. I can kind of see it because I think they view him. I think they might, view Moore's development as more important than playing Taylor, a guy who's in his last season of eligibility. Although Taylor did play those last 42 seconds or whatever last night once Syracuse took the lead and they needed a defender on, and I think they valued his experience more than Moore's upside on offense at that point.
So, Jim, we move on to a somewhat related topic. And Adrian Autry talking about after the game, he's been pushing his team to play faster than it has in recent memory. And you're going to see how the rotation plays into this. But he pointed last night to Syracuse playing 20 more possessions than they have compared to last year. And that means he wants to get out and transition more. Jim, I think that's a nice sentiment, at least, because I'm sure J.J. Starling and Chris Bell and Jaquan Carlos want to get out in the open court. But, Jim, I was thinking about this a little more. You and I were texting back and forth as we always do. I'm not sure Autry can do that for a few reasons. One is that Eddie Lampkin at 265 pounds, he's not getting up and down the floor like that for 40 minutes a night, especially with that bad back. He played 34 minutes last night, and I just can't see him laboring up and down the floor like that. And going on an earlier point, as I mentioned, this is not a team that plays great defense and turns the ball over a lot. You saw that against Colgate. Only 6 turnovers for the Raiders. Syracuse only blocking 5 shots the whole night. That just doesn't scream open court transition team to me. When Syracuse was getting out in the open floor, they were in that zone. They were creating deflections. Guys were leaking out because they were already at least out of position as it relates to the defense and running down the floor. There isn't that kind of scheme right now. If they're not creating turnovers, they're not getting out in the open floor. So that to me is a huge issue.
Yeah, you're right. I'll try to hit back on a couple different things you mentioned about Lampkin. Yeah, I think if as far as him being able to play tons of minutes and being in a run game, he doesn't need to get up and down the floor running on offensive transition. But when he gets that defensive rebound, they need to have him quick turning around and going to an outlet guy to take off now, because as you said, they're not getting the live ball turnovers that actually get things triggered in the fast break and transition. One of the long pieces I wrote several years ago was just talking about what were the most important parts of the 2-3 zone, because they were still playing at a time, and what made it successful. The big part I found or the strongest correlation I found between something statistical you see in a box score with how Syracuse would win in general was when they had a high number of steals and block shots, because a steal is a live ball turnover, and most but not all blocks are live ball turnovers as well. And that's when you get that quick change of direction. You catch guys looking the wrong way, and if you've got 2-3 guys who see the play see that change of possession and can immediately take off, that's how you get a number advantage. That's how you get out and run, and that's how you score in transition. Autry is very well intended, because he knows, despite how much he says about how this team is full of good shooters, that this is an offensively challenged bunch. And I think it's the same thing as last year with why he wanted to ramp up the tempo, is because if they can get 6 transition opportunities and get 6 or 7 points out of them, that's going to make a big deal, because he knows that there are other deficiencies that have to kind of be covered up for, and getting cheap free points like that is one way to do it.
Yeah, and again, I think because you can't play defense. Now, the one thing they do have on their side is the rebounding, right? If you rebound the ball, and let's say it's a errant 3, it clangs off the rim, and suddenly Lampkin catches it at the elbow, I think you can get out in transition that way. And we saw that a little bit last night, because he is pushing them to get out in transition every time, even if it's not a great transition opportunity. But again, I have to point out to the fact that there's only 6 turnovers. And you think about Syracuse back in the heydays in the 2008 to maybe the 2012 time period, maybe 2014, when they were playing exclusively zone. They were getting all these deflections, and they were getting, I remember seeing 20 turnovers a night to 25 turnovers a night, and that led to at least 20 transition points. That's just not what this team is. It's not how the team is constructed. And maybe they will be constructed better down the road when he can recruit more guys. You can see that his recruiting class coming in, I do think it's a little bit more athletic. They want to run and gun a little bit more, and he's catering to that. But you actually mentioned this last night. It was kind of funny. You said this team will be a good team in 2 years if the roster stays exactly the same. And I think that's right. I think they would need to really develop offensively as a team. They would more importantly need to develop defensively to create those turnovers.
Yeah, because the thing I was really getting to about that was that they're just, like we said before, the guys haven't played together much, and it's really hard. And because like even with Freeman playing, with the Bahamas this summer in the was as part of the Olympics, it's like he was not here, and now he's a guy who's starting and playing north of 20, 25 minutes a game, and it's going to be a big part. And he's just coming, and he's been in town for 2.5 months or whatever, or 3 months, whatever it is. And so it's just very hard to build those kind of relationships that make the defense better. I just think that it's going to be a work in progress. But what's concerning is they don't have time to progress. Is the games are real now, and they're struggling early, and it's setting them up for a long winter. We'll just put it that way.
Well, we'll see more of Syracuse against Youngstown State. That's November 16 at 1 p.m. And we'll see how everything goes there. That's it for us. For Jim Stechschulte, this is Wes Cheng. You've been listening to the Juice on the Cuse podcast, presented by Rivals and Believe In. We will see you next time.